In this video, we're going to talk about the difference between relative positioning and absolute positioning. Now, I know we have talked about the absolute positioning, and what's left now is to talk about the relative positioning, but in this video, we're going to talk about the two and the difference between them. So as you can see over here on our web page, we have a div, of course. You can see our div. We gave it a background color. Now inside this div, you can see we have first paragraph, you can see the second paragraph and the third paragraph. And inside this div as well, we also have a square. You can see this red square box we have here. It's inside the div. Now on the right hand side of your screen, you can see. Now one thing to know, when using the position property, you also need to use two of these properties you see here on the right hand side of your screen. You either use a top and a left, or you use a bottom and a right, or you can use a top and a right, or you can use a bottom and a left. You can't use the four of them. You can't use the four of them, okay? You can only use a top and a left, or a bottom and a right, or you can use a top and a right, or a bottom and a left. So that is that. You need to use two of these properties in the position property after you specify your position property. So let's go back to our code editor. As you can see here, you can see our main. Let's go back to our index.html. So this is our main. Yeah, so this is the code. You can see this is our square. It's a div, as you can see here. We go back to our CSS. So this is the styling. Give it a background color, a padding, and all that. So let's go back to our web page. As you can see here, we are going to be working on this square, this red square here. So this is what we are going to be working on. We are going to try to move this around with the position of absolute and the position of relative. So I'm going to show you the difference between those two. Now let's talk about the position of relative for now. So this square, we are going to give it a position of relative. We want to see the effect of it, okay? Position relative. And like I said, you need two of those properties. So we are going to give it a top of 5 pixels. And we're also going to give it a left of 5 pixels. Now let's go back to our web page now and refresh and see how this looks. So if we refresh now you can see this box. Now you can see it has shifted a little bit from the left hand side, and you can see it has also shifted a little bit from the top. And one more thing to notice, you can see it is respecting the paragraph. Okay, it's not moving it's not moving through them. It is respecting these paragraphs we have. Okay, that's why I want to show you the difference between the position of absolute and the position of relative. You can see it's still remaining here. It's not going anywhere. Now let me show you the position of absolute. Now let's go back to our code editor. Now let's change this to absolute. Let's change the relative to absolute. Position of absolute, top 5 pixels and the left of 5 pixels. So let's refresh this on our web page. Refresh. Now you can see the position of absolute. You can see it's not respecting this element, and it's also not respecting the div. You can see it is moving right through outside the div. You can see it's moving outside the div. You can see now the box is outside the div. So that is the difference between the position of relative and the position of absolute. You can see this box now is moving outside. So to make this box, to make sure this box is inside of your div, this is what you do. You need to give the parent of that element, you need to give the parent of this square element a position of relative. So everything will be relative to each other. So we need to do this. So say position of relative. So now we have given this main a position of relative. We are giving the parents of this square a position of relative. If you can go over here in our index.html, you can see our main. So this is the parent element of everything here. So we have now given it a position of relative, and now let's switch this from the bottom to, no, we are going to switch the top from top to bottom. Now you can see, if we refresh this now, you will notice that the square box will remain inside of the div. It will respect the div element. So if we refresh this now you can see it's inside of the div. After giving it a position of absolute, it's still inside the div. It didn't go anywhere. So that is the difference. For you to use a position of absolute inside of a div, if you don't want the particular element, if you don't want the container to start moving around inside of a particular div, make sure you give the parent element a position of relative. So you won't be seeing things shifting around and moving around. So because we gave this a position of relative, that's why it's inside the box. Okay, so that is the difference between a position of relative and a position of absolute. So we can also switch this now. We can switch this. You can play with your code. You can switch this from left to right. We'll say right 5 pixels. So if you go back to our web page now, refresh, now you can see it's inside the div. It's not going anywhere. It's respecting our div element. But if you don't put that position of relative to the parent element, this box will not respect this div. It will start overflowing outside of the div. So that is the difference between the position of relative and the position of absolute. Make sure when you want to use a position of absolute, make sure you give the parent element a position of relative. If you are putting a position of absolute, if you are giving any element a position of absolute, make sure you give a position of relative to the element. So that is the difference between a position of absolute and a position of relative. So that will be it for this video, guys. I will see you guys in the next video.